Welcome artists, arters, and art appreciators to Art of Lore. This is the 5th video in my 12 Days of Toys Throughout December series where I create a new little model, character, or thing every other day. This is inspired by the 12 Days of Christmas, but isn't explicitly Christmas themed, and is instead focused on the one thing everyone following me can probably enjoy, which is toys. This model today is fairly inspired by something that I like to collect, which is unicorns, I guess. I have a little collection of plush unicorns and also a couple of statuettes, like I have my Tokidoki unicorns I talked about in a recent video, and I have a few other little statues like a ceramic unicorn, and of course all of the My Little Ponies that I have. So among my plush unicorns, there is one who is not a unicorn, but is sort of an honorary member of the unicorns, and that's actually my little Pegasus. He's like a little beanbag Pegasus, and I've had this little plush Pegasus since I was very little. I would say about as long as I could remember. I must have gotten him when I was like 4 or 5 or something like that, because I've had this for so long. It's like now gray. I'll put a picture of it on screen. So he's originally a white and now gray Pegasus with ribbons in his tail and a blue mane and blue insides of his ears and wings. I don't know why I'm saying him. He doesn't have a name. Most of my stuffed animals, I just didn't often name them specific things when I was a kid, but I guess I've named this one a he. I imagine that I liked this stuffed animal because I liked the Disney movie Hercules when I was a kid. I don't know if I got him around that time. I feel like Hercules might have been a little earlier, but we did have it on VHS, I believe. Maybe he was kind of inspired by that. And his wings aren't traditional Pegasus wings, though. They're actually they're like butterfly wings, and they're made out of like a crinkly, shimmery fabric. And yeah, I've had this guy for so long, and I was thinking about him recently when I decided to look up whether or not this little guy was available on eBay or Etsy in like a new plush condition. And I actually did find one eventually. But anyways, back to the sculpt. I'll tell you about the eBay listing that I found in a little bit. I just decided I wanted to try to model my own version of this guy as a unicorn, or I guess just inspired by this plush character. It's a little bit of an oxymoron to make a 3D model, like, intended for 3D printing of a character who is originally a plushie, but I guess I kind of find the dichotomy interesting, because I did it anyways, and I wanted him to look kind of like he was a little stuffed animal, but obviously he is a little statue. You can see that I did that sort of like floppy legs backward pose. That's not actually a pose my Pegasus normally is in. He can actually just sit like kind of like a little dog, but I liked the idea of this guy being a little floppy sort of Beanie Baby style character. I went with that. Very floppy, not anatomically accurate, but the face shape certainly inspired by the little Pegasus. So regarding the eBay search that I was telling you about, on eBay I did eventually find my little Pegasus guy, and he was mislabeled because of his silly face. I really like horses that have these like really round, chunky faces. If it wasn't obvious from my love of the Takara My Little Pony, I like them having these big round noses and looking a lot like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, rather than these sort of modern My Little Pony where their noses are getting smaller and smaller. I just like when they have really chunky noses. So my little Pegasus, I finally found him on eBay, but he was mislabeled as a dragon. Because I guess he just didn't look enough like a horse for the person to label him as such. And I do have, the tag on this is actually still legible, so I know this was a Mary Meyer toy, but it was still very difficult to find a listing for this toy because it was mislabeled in the only listing that I found. Now, among other listings, I actually did find one for a unicorn in almost this exact same style. I think it was on Etsy that I found a little unicorn that was from Mary Meyer. And I was so excited It's definitely something that I would love to have, but I don't typically buy off of, like, I say that I collect unicorns, and I kind of do, but I don't really actively, like, seek them out usually. I was looking up what my Pegasus looked like when he was new, but I wasn't really intending to buy him. I was just curious. I don't generally buy things online unless, like, if I could potentially get them in person. I have purchased, like, some of my vintage My Little Ponies, which I eventually do need to restore. That's a whole other conversation. I did get some of those online because you just can't find My Little Ponies that old in person, but you can find, like, dirty ones in, like, Big Lots and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't think, I've never bought, like, a stuffed animal from the internet that's like a vintage stuffed animal, I guess, type of thing. I mean, he's not really vintage, he's probably like 20 years old. I have spent a lot of time looking up various older stuffed animals because I actually have had, like, Twitter mutuals and people on Tumblr who have, like, talked about wanting to know where, like, a particular, or, like, the brand of a particular animal, stuffed animal. And I've done that search for people to help them find stuffed animals that they had, like, photos of, but they didn't know the brand of. I did that for someone who had a bunny, and the bunny was the same brand as, like, a bunny that I had before, and so I was wondering what type of bunny it was. So I looked through listings of just bunnies, especially if you don't know the name of the brand or anything. And often people online don't even know the brand name of the thing that they're, like, selling. Like I said, my Pegasus at least says Mary Meyer, but a lot of companies don't have labels that are legible for 20 years, or they get ripped off or cut off or something like that. They get faded. Mine is quite faded. So yeah, you can spend a lot of time looking for like, vintage toys and stuff like that and come up completely blank. Especially since among the Mary Meyer toys that I found, I only found, like, one listing for this Pegasus on all of eBay and Etsy that I could see, at least. So I'm not the best in the world at it, but I have spent some time looking for this type of stuff before. So like I said, there was, like, a unicorn version of my Pegasus, and on one hand, I would like to own it, but on the other hand, I tend to use stuff as inspiration and make my own versions. You know, that's why I make so many toys for myself, because I just like being inspired by stuff and then making my own version. And I will say, it has occurred to me that there is a program, I think, or I don't know if it's a program, it's like a website. There's a website that I think is called Plushify, which I think is like a service where you can turn a 3D model into a plush. Or at least I know that there is one service out there that's like a free app or module that someone created where you can just turn a character, like, into a plush pattern and then sew your own plush. So I am very tempted to do something like that with a version of one of my sculpts. Not the one that I'm working on in this video exactly, because I add a lot of detail to it. I made hair for it, and, like, that stuff obviously wouldn't need to be part of the plushie. Like, it would just need to be basically, I would have to make this its most simple parts. Like, I would have to spread out the legs much more, and, you know, remove the hair and remove all of the details that I'm doing for, like, the seam lines. And then I could make it into a plush pattern using, like, a website. But that is something that is very tempting. And that way I could make it, you know, however I want. Like, I could completely customize how I make the unicorn and everything. If you didn't know how I did all of these lines, the long and the short of what I did in Blender here is that I made all of those lines using what are called curves, and then I made those curves into cylinders, very long cylinders, and then I used a boolean, which is essentially a modifier that removes part of the mesh. That's the best I can sum it up. So it subtracts the lines that I made, and then I just smoothed all that out by hand. But I just did this because I felt like it would give, like, a really even plush texture, rather than, like, doing it by hand. It can be a little bit wibbly wobbly. I'm not the best at the sculpting freehand in Blender yet, so I tend to do most of my stuff by adding or subtracting like simpler shapes. I prefer that much more to sculpting. But yes, I think that if printed, this unicorn would make an excellent addition to my collection, and then someday I can make her in plush form so that I have multiple versions, and I can grow my unicorn army larger and larger. Okay, I'll see you at the reveal. Okay, here is our little plush pony in Cura to preview how it looks while printing. This is all one piece, and I made it so that it would need as minimal supports as possible. No floating islands. I did a lot of testing to make sure that the top part of the chin was all facing up so that it wouldn't need too much support near the head and the hair and everything. I did actually some of that work on camera, so most of the sculpt took like about an hour, but then there was a bunch of extra time for me to do those little details and make it printable. So here she is. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and all that. Thank you to my Ko-fi supporters, Yesella, Retro Geek Crafts, and Luca. Okay, thank you all. Have a nice day. Bye.